Hey, all, it's Peter. I wanted to let you know something that I'm really excited about. The Orthodox Presbyterian Church, the OPC, is exploring a new church plant in central Orange County in the Tustin or Irvine area, of which I'm part of. We're gathering interest for an informational session about this church plant and upcoming Bible studies. If you or someone you know is interested, go to our show notes, click the link OPC and the OC on top, and subscribe for our updates. Please share this with your friends and family. Anyone who's looking for a confessionally reformed, evangelistically minded church in the heart of Orange County. I hope to meet you soon.
Hey everybody, this is Pastor Danny Hyde from the Oceanside United Reformed Church. I want to invite you out to our church. We meet in sunny Southern California, here in San Diego, and we meet at the Army Navy Academy in Carlsbad, right along the ocean, as you can see, the Pacific. And we meet every Sunday at 10 o'clock in the morning. We hear the Word of God, we hear the Gospel preached. We have the Lord's Supper every Sunday morning, and then we have Sunday school at about noon for kids. We come again together at 5 o'clock every night, Sunday night, for teaching, prayer, and singing. And then we also have various midweek groups, Bible studies, men's, women's, and also other Bible studies as well throughout the week. So I want to invite you out to worship with us. If you know anybody in the area here in North County of San Diego, invite them as well. Let them know. You can find out more about us on our website, oceansideurc.org, or also on all those various social media. You'll find us as well. God bless.
Hello, everyone. Yet once again, it's another day of fresh grace and mercy. This is the Guilt, Grace, Gratitude podcast, where we bridge the gap to Reformed Christian theology for your listening pleasure. Today's book club episode is brought to us by Erdman's Publishing, and we're talking to a repeat guest. We're honored to have Dr. Michael Horton on with his new book, his long-awaited book, Shaman and Sage, The Roots of Spiritual but Not Religious in Antiquity. And it is the Divine Self Volume 1. So we've been waiting for this for a while. It's been a while since we've had Dr. Horton on. It's always a pleasure and an honor. And if you guys go to our show notes, there's a link to Erdman's. Click that. It's actually the link straight to this book. So not just Erdman's in general, but the link straight to this book where you can check it out for yourself and order it. Also a NAPARC Church Finder link, so you can find a Reformed Presbyterian confessional church near your area. And then also our website and our shop, so you can get things like mugs that say another day of fresh grace and mercy on here, t-shirts, stickers, that kind of stuff. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, so we're mission-based. This is not our job. It's just what we do. And if we get any donations, it's to keep the podcast running and doing well. And also, if you want to catch us in between episodes on social media, you can go to Twitter. Peter pretty much manages that account. And then our Instagram, I pretty much manage that. And then these episodes are uploaded to YouTube. And so you can watch these on YouTube. You can see the playlists of the different episodes that we have. On Thursdays, we have book clubs. On Mondays, our seasonal episodes. And so check that out. Subscribe to us on both podcast apps and YouTube. Now, this is really important. Feel free to comment and have a dialogue with us, but rate and review us, because in the algorithm, it sorts it to the top, so it's easier for people to find. So other than that, let's get into this. Let's talk to Dr. Horton. I'll let Peter further introduce Dr. Michael Horton today.
Yeah, my former professor at Westminster Seminary, California, which is still weird to say whenever I have a professor from Westminster. He's the J. Gresham Machen Professor of Systematic Theology and Apologetics at Westminster Seminary, California. And I think some of our listeners might know him from White Horse Inn or Sola Media, Modern Reformation. His toes dip in a lot of waters, but he's mostly a minister and a professor. But it's a pleasure having you come back on the show, Dr. Horton.
It's great, Peter. And Nick, good to see you again.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, Mike, it's Mike now. So.
We got to be formal on the front end, and then we'll get informal as we go along.
Then it just falls away. Good.
It's
all right.
I got to be honest. It's still really weird to call Dr. Clark, Scott, because I still feel like his wrath is going to be on me, or Van Drunen. I'm terrified of calling Dr. Van Drunen David. I feel like I don't know what's going to come after. There's this still part of me that's just like, I'm gonna get slapped or something if I say their first name. But yeah, let's get into this. So the shaman and sage, the antique roots of spiritual but not religious. So where'd your interest in the roots of the spiritual but not religious, the identifier, come from? It's been around for a little bit, but where'd your interest come from? And we'll get further into kind of your book as well. So yeah, where'd your interest in this movement kind of come from first?
Well, one, I'm really, an apologist at heart, and I try to understand what it is that makes it difficult for people to accept Christianity, and what are the challenges for us today as Christians, as churches, living in a culture that is increasingly secular. And about, just after the flood, I was at Oxford taking lectures from this really famous theologian who had once upon a time been an evangelical leader in the InterVarsity movement in England, and now had become something else. And to cut the story short, he did a Venn diagram with each lecture, and this is probably 500 students in a lecture hall. It was one of the most popular lectures I've ever been to. He put one circle up there of Mahayana Buddhism. And then he put another circle there of, and by the time he put all the circles there, they were the mystical versions of each of the religions. Sufi Islam, Meister Eckhart on the Christian side, and so forth. So, but they all meet in the middle. Where do they meet in the middle? So his was very well informed intellectually, but his goal was very apologetic. It was to get people to that center of the Venn diagram where we're all spiritual, not religious. And that was, for me, I walked out, and actually I had some time afterwards with a Jewish guy, a Muslim, and he did actually bring about unity, because we were all decrying together the way in which this white middle class British liberal Protestant had basically dissed our particular religions in favor of his religion, that he wouldn't call a religion, but rather this mystical synthesis of the religions. So that really, it bothered me. I was also really, he piqued my interests, and I really wasn't that interested in my doctoral dissertation anymore. I had to finish it, but I kept going to these kinds of seminars. Then I did a 2-year postdoctoral fellowship at Yale, focusing on philosophy and these, trying to fill in gaps and so forth. Anyway, long story. I gobbled up all of my sabbaticals at the seminary last 25 years for this project. And now it's finally like, oh my goodness, giving birth to a cinder block. And the first volume is from antiquity to the Renaissance. The second volume is the Renaissance to the scientific revolution. The third is it goes all the way to the present through Romanticism and a lot of the movements that have really shaped modernity. So that's the goal, is to understand why this whole phenomenon of spiritual but not religious secularization is not, we misunderstand. Secularization is not atheism. It's not people going off to atheism. It's people leaving our churches for an amorphous kind of pantheism.
Mhm.
Not atheism, but pantheism. And what they all dislike, the great opposition, is toward Christian monotheism. The idea of a God who is a personal God who stands outside of us and over us and creates the world, creates us, owns us. Ooh, we don't like that.
Yeah.
And judges us.
Mhm.
But a God who doesn't create us and judge us and own us also can't redeem us.
Yep.
We can't redeem ourselves. And so we got to recover the creator-creature distinction, I believe, not only as an important bedrock doctrine of our theology, but as good news. It's really good news that I don't have to turn inside myself to find some little divine genie in there. I look outside myself and say, Lord, have mercy upon me, a sinner. And I'm redeemed. I'm saved. I got to be rescued. I can't rescue myself. That's a lot to put on somebody, you know?
Yeah.
Hey, create yourself, create your identity.
The modern project. Yeah.
Yeah, make yourself. Oh, and save yourself too.
And it seems so restful and so freeing. It's like, oh, it's all on you. And it's like, wait 1 second. It's all on me.
Why do you think there's so many suicides?
That's there's been a lot of link between them. Yep, exactly. Yeah.
This all goes back to the first lie in the garden, right?
Yeah.
You
so
should be as gods.
You've already kind of answered this, but
I didn't go that far back.
That's right. No, but so you've already answered this, but I think it's also, but I think a lot of people know you from, well, I mean, this is not to say that this book is not theologically driven. It certainly is theologically driven, philosophically driven, historically driven, sociologically. There's a lot of come into this, but I think most know you from My Horse Inn, or more, I'll say, like theological projects, maybe less so for like this, or you've had some works back in the 2000s that were somewhat similar to this as well. So maybe, like, why return to this kind of big project after you've been known for as a guy who just kind of pumps out theology? Why something on spirituality and philosophy and orphism, all this kind of academic speak that seems like kind of outside the purview of Christianity?
Yeah, it's interesting. My other books are classified under Christian doctrine, Christian systematic theology, so forth. This one isn't at all.
No.
I was surprised. This one is under comparative religion, history of ancient Greece and Rome.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yep.
And that's where I want it. I really want to make a case. I feel like the person I'm talking to actually is someone who might be spiritual but not religious.
Yep.
And is interested in kind of understanding the phenomenon historically, maybe the person who has an interest in history and in philosophy. And so I'm not polemical. It's not that I hide my convictions at all.
You don't.
It's let's reason together. I want to tell a story here. It's not the whole story of modernity by any means, but it is an important story that is often left out. And that is the story of how the mystics on the margins become the shapers of modernity. And, you know, from the Gnostics to the radical Neoplatonists, pantheists, to Spinoza, to radical Anabaptists and pietists, to Spinoza, and then on to the Protestant liberals, who all appealed to these figures as their source of inspiration. Connecting those dots has been fascinating for me, just fascinating. So at least I've had fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember being in your class and hearing what I'm assuming were kind of the research project leading into this.
Yeah.
At least that's what I remember hearing was yours. Like, I'm working on this book, and here's my research, and that was essentially our apologetics class, which
Yeah.
was, I'm gonna say, 90% above me. But the stuff that came to me, I was like, this makes sense of a lot of the spiritual movements in our day, and of how people speak about their own spiritualities. Like this kind of makes sense for what people are saying, instead of just having like a ready-made argument for like, oh, why do you believe this, and this is what I'm going to tell you right back after. But it's understanding, like you said, the waters below this, what
Yes.
the soil that grew this, versus just looking at the thing on top.
Until we understand that, Peter, we're not going to really understand how these forces shape our churches.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, Gnosticism, and this, you have to realize, spiritual, not religious. This phenomenon is cooked up in our churches.
100%. Yep.
It has, throughout history, it has been pastors and children of pastors, people studying for the ministry, who lost interest in orthodoxy and became mystics and philosophers who invented this stuff.
Yeah.
And so we really do have to recognize, what is it that, especially in pietism, gotta be honest, especially in radical Anabaptism, it's sort of like all of the philosophers who really transformed modern thinking were Lutheran pietists who looked back to, and some of them Reformed pietists, who looked back to the people who were like strange mystics in their own day.
Yeah.
What is this? What is this? What, and why does it keep happening?
Yep. Yeah, the spiritualist, which leads to next question.
Oh yeah. I mean, we as Christians totally understand and get that God created us to worship, and since the fall, worship has been distorted, and people are worshiping something. It's either God, the one true God, or themselves, or something else. So
yeah, the David Foster Wallace syndrome. It's everyone's worshiping. It's just, what are you worshiping?
So, like, to your point, this isn't really an argument against atheism. It's more of an argument against kind of spiritual Platonism, or
It's also an argument like, you think there's no religion? No, there's certainly religion, but let's see what this religion is.
Yeah, look at the statistics, for example. We focus almost all of our apologetics on the 1.5% of American adults who say they're atheists.
Yeah.
That's true.
Whereas the important phenomenon here is spiritual, not religious.
And atheism has been dropping in popularity ever since the New Atheists kind of just broke up. It's not a thing anymore.
No, the band is broke up, and people, if you even go to atheists like Sam Harris, for example, he says, "Oh, I'm very spiritual."
Oh, I know. I listened to his podcast, and he's always talking about his Buddhism, his meditation practice. Like, I don't think you realize what you're doing.
Yeah, that doesn't quite. But you can be a Buddhist and an atheist because they don't believe in a personal God. And see, this is the point. You can be religious, but not Christian,
right?
Or theistic even. And this is where traditional Islam, traditional Judaism, traditional Christianity, just are disdained by westernized, modernized younger generations that don't want anything to do with a personal God, whether it's Judaism, Islam, or Christianity. They don't want anything to do with monotheism. Right. They are eating up pantheism like there's no tomorrow. And that's why in Iran, for example, Christianity is growing, but so is Zoroastrianism and Sufi. And the spiritual but not religious category is zooming in Iran.
Yep.
What is not zooming, what's tumbling into the dirt, is Shia Islam,
Hmm.
the official religion of the Republic.
Yep.
So it's happening all over the place.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And man, if I had a nickel for every time I heard someone say I'm spiritual but not religious, I could probably pay off my mortgage. And I mean, it's just
Which ain't much up
it's
there in
crazy.
Idaho, but it's
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I'm still saying it's a lot of
Yeah.
nickels. And
And
I've
scientists they
Yep.
say
Yeah.
so it's not really a victory at all. I wonder what Richard Dawkins and other avowed atheists, I wonder what they think of this. They surely can't be happy. They can't be satisfied with spirituality any more than with religion,
Mhm.
because it's not atheist, it's pantheist.
Right.
In fact, Dawkins says that that atheism is just sexed up pantheism. See, if God is everything, then he's nothing.
Exactly. Yep. If everyone's special, no one's special.
Yeah. If everything's a miracle, nothing's a miracle. If
Mhm.
everything is divine, there is no divinity. And that's really why people can never tell, are you an atheist or a pantheist? Spinoza is a good example of that. Socrates was a good example of that. They killed him because they said he was an atheist. He wasn't an atheist, he was a pantheist. But it's hard to tell them apart.
It is.
Yeah.
Once you've reduced God to the world and made God the divine whatever force or whatever flowing through the universe, you might as well be an atheist. And that's why Einstein said Spinoza's God is my God. When he was asked, what's your religion? He says, Spinoza's God is my God. And I noticed in a podcast, I think it was with a Babylon Bee, they asked Elon Musk about his religion.
That's
and
right.
He said verbatim, Spinoza's God is my God.
That's right. I
And
remember this.
he didn't even have the decency of giving Einstein credit.
That's right. Didn't cite a source.
Well, nope. But my I guess now on to my question too, because I think it's helpful to get some definitions laid out, even if it seems obvious, because you do explain what being spiritual or what spirituality actually is, what it represents, what it's defined as, and what religion represents, and what it's being religious is defined. So maybe those two things, if you could give a really helpful,
good,
give some handlebars onto like what each of them really means.
Yeah, that's good. Well, okay, so polytheism, at least we agree with polytheists that there are personal gods.
True. There's at least distinct personal gods. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're closer to Yahweh is closer to Zeus than he is to the Force. So God represents himself in anthropomorphic terms. We don't actually believe that God has wings, that God cries, that God has ears and so forth. We know those are anthropomorphisms, but this is baby talk. God is telling us what he's like. We'll never know what God is in himself, but he tells us what he's like. And these are the things he's like. He's clearly a personal God, a God who creates, a God who acts, a God who thinks, a God who feels, a God who is there for us. How do you pray to the Force? How do you and it's all deterministic. It's fatalistic, which is amazing for people who want freedom.
Yeah, Sam Harris is a determinist. He doesn't believe in the free will.
You have to be. If you're a pantheist, everything is just unfolding.
Yeah. Christians think that's a Calvinist Arminian discussion. It's like, no, that's actually a much bigger discussion than you think it is.
No, Calvinists actually affirm freedom.
Yep.
Over against determinism, if we're having that conversation.
Exactly.
So in fact, it's interesting, especially on this podcast, to mention the first response to Spinoza in the 17th century, the pantheist philosopher Spinoza, who, by the way, got a lot of this stuff by being in a group. He was excommunicated from his Jewish synagogue for being a pantheist. He was hanging out with a group of people called the Dutch Collegiants, made up of, first of all, the Arminians who'd been kicked out of the Reformed Church, Quakers and Baptists and Mennonites, and freethinkers. So this was kind of like a lodge, a Masonic lodge. People got together, and it was like a Quaker meeting. They got to share, whatever their inspiration. It was very much my inner light. Let me share what my inner self just said last night. And very philosophical. And they were on the radical end of politics, Republican politics in the Netherlands. Anyway, what they really hated was the church and the priests. They wanted the invisible church. They were, like the Anabaptists. We don't like the visible church. The church is the priests have wrecked everything. Wicked priests. It's just we got to just get together and have these. So anyway, Spinoza came out of that, and the first response to Spinoza, this great philosopher of the modern age, came from the classis of Zwolle of the Dutch Reformed Church, pastors and elders getting together, poring over his manuscripts. Most people hadn't even read, even philosophers, by this time. It just came out. And it's amazing what they pick out. And one of the things that they say is denial of free will. So there you have the Reformed Church condemning Spinoza's pantheism for denying human freedom.
This is not what you expect.
Love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah. That's yeah, it's not what you expect. I would very much encourage people to maybe not dive too deep into some of this stuff because it could be confusing, but to see some of the debates that are happening because they're interesting. So another thing that shows up, and I remember this from class, and it was fun reading about this, is like, this is a nightmare all over again. But you talk about Orphic religion, and I remember that from Modern Mind at Westminster, and then that's all throughout this first volume is Orphism, the Orphic religion, Orphic philosophy, whatever it is. And so without kind of rehashing 400 pages from volume 1 of the Divine Self series, but if you can give maybe just like a little crash course, what is Orphism? My assumption is that's the first time anybody who's listening to this has ever heard that term. And like, what on earth does Orphism have to do with spirituality, with religion, with Platonism, with all this stuff? So if you can maybe explain what that is.
Yeah, the Orphic sounds like a band. But so in Greek mythology, there are two gods who are particularly interesting. They're obviously both the children of Zeus. Apollo is the god of reason and order. And so people come to Delphi to hear his rational prophecies. And then he takes a vacation, goes to the north for a holiday, while his brother comes out of his tomb every spring, Dionysus. Dionysus is the god of craziness, the god of revelry. He's the party god. He's the god of wine in Greek mythology. And he's the god of theater. He's the god of Greek tragedy. He's the one, the great Dionysus was the festival, theater festival every year in Athens. It was called the Great Dionysus. So everything was built in the origins of Western theater, and particularly drama, tragedy. Everything was built around the figure of Dionysus. Well, if you just have order and so forth and everything, you kind of have a Prussian government. And
it's no fun.
That's no fun. If you have just woohoo, Woodstock every day.
Mhm.
Chaos. Yeah.
Chaos. So you had this other figure, Orpheus, who was magical, and he used music as his medium of magic, and he reconciled these brothers. That was a mythical way of talking about reconciling this almost left brain, right brain thing in our psyche. The Western mind has always been rationalistically mystical and mystically rational.
Mm-hmm.
The brothers may be reconciled, but they still they fight like crazy in the dorm room. They are just within us, both of those sides. So B.B. Warfield said, "Scratch a rationalist and he bleeds mysticism."
Uh-huh.
And that's what I'm talking about here.
That's
So
true.
there's this tradition now, and I trace that tradition.
Yep.
Pythagoras
Mhm.
and Plato, Empedocles, others, very closely aligned with what was happening also in India
Mhm.
and in North Africa, especially in Egypt, and what was happening in around the Black Sea. And this kind of shaman figure comes out as this magical figure who's always living on the margins outside the city. You have the public religion over here that is kind of stayed, and Apollo is in charge. But out here, you have the ecstatic religion where the shaman goes through 3 worlds and he brings dead souls back, the souls of the deceased, the departed back in seances and the like. Whereas the priests in the town, in the city, this walled city, they don't want the dead to come back. The whole point of them being dead is that they don't come back.
Mhm.
They have rites and rituals to keep the dead out of the precincts of the city. So you have this real contrast. What Western spirituality really wants is contact with the other world, contact with the souls, thinking I am myself a divine spark. I have divinity within me. I can get out of my body, this prison of flesh, and return to that ecstatic unity. And philosophy is the means of doing that. That's how philosophy was born. The word philosophy means the love of wisdom. And it was a way of life. It wasn't a major in college. It was considered exactly what you would call today self-help. If you go to the bookstore section, people don't go to bookstores anymore, but it's the self-help section of the bookstore. It's how to live, eat, pray, love. That's how it was born.
Yeah, it sounds like, maybe to summarize it, it's the origin where Orpheus came in to combine both the order and the chaos, and then later on with India, with Egypt, with all these other places, all this, the order of the traditional religion and the chaos of the shaman, and then that's brought in. And it seems like, yeah, it's not too dissimilar from Western religion, where you have people who are very rationalistic. It's, no, I'm only rational, I'm only scientific, I'm only logical, but I love astrology. And you're like, I'm not sure how this works out, because you say you're rationalistic and yet you love mysticism. And it's, you can see that, like you said, that Orphic thread is being weaved through all of these kind of historical eras.
You were schizophrenic.
Yeah.
And look at the church, you see it in the church. You have one a Dionysian part of the Christian church that is always looking for the next the next spirit, kind of crazy roller coaster.
To, kick up our emotions.
That's right. And then you have us.
Yeah.
The staid, traditional, weird ones.
The chosen frozen, it's no, seriously, it's something that we have to all think about, because it's not out there.
No, it's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
Yep.
Including inside of me.
Yep. And me.
And me. So I felt like I had to say that.
Took you a while, Nick. It took you too long.
I was like, okay, and me.
That's right.
All right. Some of your answer might echo the answer for this question. So if it does, I kind of have like another way of phrasing it. But the roots of Western history's interpretation of historical philosophy that made such a breeding ground for seeking divine self-spirituality. What is it about the roots of Western history's interpretation of that historical philosophy that has made it just a perfect petri dish recipe for divine self-spirituality? Is it
Yeah, maybe add to like, and it's distinctions. We think it's Eastern that's mystic and not
Right.
Western. We think Western's rational. So yeah, that's
There's a post-Enlightenment narrative,
yeah.
and not just post-Enlightenment, but especially 19th and 20th century narrative that says, yeah, I know about all these movements, the Orphism, whatever.
Mhm.
That's the result of alien cultures influencing our culture. It's craziness. It's that it's a corruption of Plato's rationalism.
We have purity, and something came into it and made it
Something
less.
came into it. Some weird Oriental. It's usually called Oriental.
Yep.
Some weird Oriental thing. And then you remember when the New Age movement came up, a lot of conservatives said, "Well, it's the Beatles. They brought
Right.
India. They went over and hung out with a few Brahmins and came back with."
Oh, we can't have rock music anymore.
No, exactly. And there's always this really reductionistic, simplistic narrative on both sides. So on the rationalist side, there can't be any history of mysticism in our rationalism. And you got peanut butter in my chocolate, you got chocolate in my peanut butter. There can't be any Reese's here. And then you have the other side, usually on our side, saying that really basically the same thing. We are rational and we're Christian. So if you have this irrational and anti-Christian spirituality, well, it can't come from the West. It must come from the East, or it must come from communists or something. And it's ridiculous. But it's a result of just not knowing the history. So that's one of the reasons I'm trying to correct it, not just to try to reach out to non-Christians, but also just to kind of enrich and deepen our understanding of where we've come from, so that we can have healthier churches and healthier evangelism, healthier witness, and not just be blaming things on this or that. Just it because this happened or that happened, the secularists are coming after us and so forth. No, most of the secularists were born, sadly, in our churches.
Yeah.
And I'm just throwing it out there. My backup question, you don't even have to really answer it, but it was about the influence of the axial age. I thought that was pretty interesting. I think if people want to read more about that in your book, it did help explain kind of like how some thought is where it is today with the roots of some of the axial age as well.
Yeah, it's hard to talk about it without kind of going into the weeds, because
right. Yeah.
But it's this idea that in the 6th century before Christ, there was this kind of major movement that coincided with the very quick rise of the Persian Empire. And it basically encompassed the whole region that the Persian Empire covered, from India all the way to Europe, south through Greece to Egypt. So you have the rise of philosophical religions, Buddhism, Hinduism, Jainism, Zoroastrianism, and late period, Egypt had a very different religion than it did before the 6th century. And what do all of these religions have in common? They basically depersonalize the gods and make nature itself divine.
Yeah, there's no more transcendence. It's only immanence.
Exactly. And this kind of, again, pantheistic sort of spirit.
Yeah. If God's everywhere, then he's immanent. He's no longer transcendent.
That's right. And that's why, and it came to Greece with the Orphics. So the Orphism is the Western version of that. It's basically Orphism. Some people would say Platonism, but Orphism is the Western version of what happened with the rise of Hinduism and Buddhism and so forth.
Oh, very nice. Cool.
And was influenced by all those trends.
And I mean, it's so long ago, but you see how it influenced and developed and grew into how it influences us today. It's interesting. So
yeah, it's like, it's always, I don't want to compare it to a virus, but it's always, it invades a host and it sort of, it incubates, it sits there.
Yeah.
And it's suppressed. So like in Christendom, you have another going back to a locative worldview.
Yep.
And then every now and again, the virus comes to life, and it happens again and again and again. It just happens to be that right now we're going through another one of those fevers.
Yep.
And it's time for us to understand what that fever is.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's nothing new under the sun. I think I've heard that somewhere.
Right. There's a great Mark Twain put it best, I think. Not to put it in competition with an inspired writer, but when he said, history doesn't repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So it's not like our world is any less spiritual, and I think that's pretty obvious from what we're talking about here, but because it's certainly more mystic. So you kind of laid out those definitions of spiritual, mystic, religion. So religion detached from dogma is pervasive in modernity. How do various forms of mysticism, and I learned this in your book, that Wicca is one of the fastest growing, if not the fastest growing religions. There's astrology, Buddhism, etc. How do those actually provide an easier on-ramp for modern secularists who didn't previously identify with a religious tradition?
Yeah. Well, I think that so part of it is people who were raised in a religious tradition still want to, there's something, whether it's nostalgia or whatever, they still want to have some kind of cling to some kind of something they're not answerable to,
or something bigger than them.
Yeah, like a personal God outside of, but
tells them what to do.
Right, exactly. But something inside them that always says yes, always gives them candy, so on and so forth. I'm God. If I look within myself, that's where I find it, and I don't have to be I don't have to be challenged or anything. But I think another reason simply is that there is a culture-wide movement against traditional monotheism. I keep emphasizing this. I don't think it's just that they, some people, yes, have been hurt in church. Some of our churches have really hurt people in terrible ways.
Yeah.
Some people have had bad experiences. Some people have, I know, but they would go back if they really believed it. I mean, I would say I've been hurt in churches, but
same here. Yeah.
I say, well, I don't agree with them. I think that what they did was wrong. And I might even go to a different church that I think preaches the gospel clearly and so forth. I don't think churches are infallible. So I'm not going to leave Christianity because I had a bad experience. Not to downplay the fact that some people do. I'm just saying, I think that people who do don't really have a deeply rooted Christian conviction in the first place.
Mhm.
But I think a lot of folks leave because if you have a sovereign God who created everything, created you, means you can't create yourself. You cannot decide for yourself who you are, what you are, your identity. There are certain aspects. You have freedom, but there are certain things about nature. God created, bees to fly and birds to soar and fish to swim and human beings to be his image bearers. If that's if that's a little too cramped for you, you're going to go looking for a spirituality that doesn't have that kind of, there are things that are cramping about Christianity. It's called belonging. It's called actually having beliefs that we share in common. A universe, yes, that is finite. I'm finite. There's no part of me that's divine. I like that I'm finite because it means that my sin can't be infinite. My God can save me because I'm a finite fallen creature and he's infinite in his grace and mercy. So this is a win-win. We have not made the case because we've assumed Christianity for so long. We haven't made, we've got to look at America and the West in general, the way the first Christians looked at the Roman Empire, because it's very similar.
Yeah, they were spiritual. They certainly had their emperors and gods or tribal deities, whatever it was. And I'm sure there was no, I guess, official religion, although I guess you could make the case that Caesar was the official religion. But yeah, it's very similar to where, the early Christians didn't never assume that the emperor or the Caesar or whoever it was Christian. The people that are talking to were Christians. They always explain the faith from the bare bones basics to the more academic stuff, if you will. But yeah,
I think if the early Christians came back to us today, they'd say, "You bunch of whiners! Oh my goodness, are you serious?" I mean, because we're whining because we think we own this place, and it's being stolen underneath us. It never has.
It was never ours.
Yeah, it's always been a mixed bag.
Yeah.
So, it's something that we need to stop whining and start reflecting and praying and talking to each other about these really deep streams in our own traditions and thinking that can help us understand ourselves and the people we're talking to.
Yeah, and it could be like the traditions, they're so steeped in the Christianity at points when churches, like you said, that's preached from the pulpit, these mystic, you could say, imposed elements on the gospel, that when we look at other mystic traditions, if we look at Orphism, if we look at Wicca, if we look at Zoroastrian, if we look at Buddhism, we're like, oh, it's not that different than the stuff, or we don't notice the differences because it's been so seeped into the Christian faith. They're like, oh, okay, well, they're spiritual, so that's all right.
Right.
Well, and I think too, Buddhism, for example, is not offensive to anybody. So I feel like it's more comfortable in this PC era where people are like, hey, nobody's going to judge me for
you don't believe
just wanting everyone.
Buddhism. Yeah,
you're right. But Christianity is offensive to the gospel is offensive to the sinner. I mean, it could be where they are like, oh, this is something that I have to look straight at and understand that I'm either belonging to heaven or hell kind of situation versus something that a little bit more less offensive to them, I think.
Well, once again, Nick, yeah, you're right. It goes back to a personal God versus an impersonal force. And well, of course, Buddhism doesn't affirm a personal God. It's really about achieving on your own a state of nirvana. And so it's all about practices. Americans are can-do people.
Oh, big time. Buddhism is making big inroads here.
Oh yeah, you look at we're like the plumber who took a look at Niagara Falls and said, "Give me a minute, I can fix it."
Yeah.
Just give me something. Give me some rules that I can keep. Give me some steps that I can follow. Give me a YouTube video. And of course, the Buddhism that's practiced in America is so watered down.
Big time.
Any respectable Buddhist anywhere in the world would just say this is. But Buddhism can almost be anything you want it to be in lots of ways that Christianity can't. And again, why? Because a personal God is involved. You can't manipulate. You can't just kind of decide today, well, I would like to practice this. I find this interesting. I find that beautiful. You're faced with a person, and that person is either real or like the Easter Bunny. But you're faced with a person. Christianity stands or falls with dealing with a personal God. And now what's he like? And what has he done to either judge or save me? And how can I be reconciled to him? All of those questions, they can't be asked in these kinds of religions we're talking about, because they don't even have a person, a personal God who created us, holds us accountable, and saves us.
Yeah. So that brings me to, I'm going to combine these two questions. I think they're better combined than they are separate. And this also goes into a little bit of syncretism. We've talked about how I think as Christians, we assume like, oh, this stuff hasn't seeped into our religion or seeped into our practice or seeped into our pulpits, but like, oh, it most certainly has. And one of them that you talk about towards the end of volume 1 is the separation of body and soul. And of course, we believe that we're body, soul humans, but it's to the point where like the body's carnal, it's gross, it's got less value, and the soul spiritual, it's be cared for at expense. And so Christian discourse can either knowingly or unknowingly accept this into our anthropology, and that's kind of get the Left Behind series with this. You get a lot of don't worry about your body, and the soul is all that matters, and all the world's going to be burned down anyway, so who cares about all the physical? So can you talk about the roots of this dualism and how it entered into Christian talk of the body-soul relationship and what that actually is?
Well, that's volume 1. It's hard to answer that because it's sort of really a major question that I try to address all throughout that book. Yeah, I think that on the one hand, Plato, Plato has said some good things. And he believed, for example, that the chief end of man is union with God, to be conformed to God as much as it is possible for a creature to be. Well, that sounds a lot like the first question and answer of the Westminster Shorter Catechism to me. He believed that we have souls and that souls live on after our bodies. He believed that God is the efficient cause of the universe, not only the final end or goal of the universe, but the creator and providential preserver. There are all sorts of points at which you say, oh, boy, Plato really corrupted Christianity. Well, yeah, he did bring in this Orphic dualism between body and soul, and the hope that we can escape this prison house of the flesh rather than it being raised on the last day. there are points at which, like deep and many points at which Christianity just has to say no to Plato. But you compare him to the other philosophers, and he is the kind of the only game in town you can do business with in terms of apologetics. So it makes sense that Christians, if they were going to have to speak a language of their day, that they would prefer to use Plato's categories than someone else's. But it has had a tendency to kind of a corrupting tendency as culture, culture can't be all terrible because God created it and he sustains it.
Yep.
But it can't be fused with Christianity because it's part of our fallen our fallen labors. So what do? Well, we have to use wisdom and discernment and say, well, we can go with this, but not with that. Well, no, we wouldn't say it like that. That sounds Platonic, so on and so forth. There's a lot of Platonism, a lot of that people don't even realize is Platonism. This Orphic dualism between body and soul. People now use terminology like passing away. Christians believe people die.
No.
Only dead people can be raised. People who pass away can't. There's no resurrection for people who pass away. We believe in death and resurrection. So, we're very Jewish that way. Christianity is. We're not Gentile. Tertullian in the 2nd century called Christians a third race. And I think that's a good way of us thinking about this, that we have to always realize that Christianity is different, it's distinct, but we have to use the language God has given us in his providence where he's placed us. And sometimes we have to find bridges. And Plato was a better bridge than others. Sort of like the line from Churchill, democracy is a terrible form of government except for all the other forms of government.
Exactly. Yeah. Maybe to put a pin on it before Nick ends it. And it's not just in Christian talk that we get this, but even this orphism. And I don't know, I don't think you touch on it in volume 1, not that I can remember. And I wouldn't doubt that you're going to touch on it later on, but kind of a lot of the gender stuff that we're going through, where it's the inner soul is the true me. Like I feel like this, but the outer body doesn't show that. And it's you may not. I think us Christians will just like lambast that. It's like, well, how could you possibly think that? I was like, that's the cultural waters. The cultural waters are the Orphic thought, where the soul is the true thing, the inner thing is the true thing, and the outer flesh is the thing that can pass away.
Yeah, the true me has nothing to do with my body.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that of course I'm not qualified to talk about the psychological.
Yep, totally. There's more to it. Yeah,
there's more to it, but definitely the psychology itself has been formed in a culture that is very much shaped by this dualism of soul and body.
Yeah.
So if somebody makes the argument that I am the real me, disagrees with the mere appearance of me on the outside, I'm going to have to say I'm sorry, that's a Gnostic doctrine. If you're Christian, Christians don't believe that. And here's why. Here's why we don't. But I think a lot of people assume we do. A very famous conservative evangelical pastor has said we meet God in the realm of the spirit. He also says we only continue to sin because we are still souls in a physical body. Or you have people writing books like He That Is Spiritual, talking about the flesh and the spirit in 2 Corinthians 3 in terms of the immaterial soul and the external physical. I mean, you get it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you meet God? I meet God in my spirit,
Mm-hmm.
not in physical things like
Mm-hmm.
preaching and water with baptism and bread and wine. That's not where I meet him. I meet him alone in the garden while the dew is still on the roses, and he walks with me and he talks with me and tells me I'm his own. And the joy we share as we tarry there, none other. Are you serious? None other has ever known. Really?
Yep.
And you invent your own religion. You had your own experience that no other Christian has ever had with Jesus. It's so personal, so unique that no other Christian has ever had it. That's a sure sign that it's heresy.
Yep.
Yeah. There's a true irony there of ones that are worshiping themselves in their innermost, what they're feeling. They're doing that by exercising, worshiping physical things outside of themselves, like in a platonic kind of Platonist
the thing
kind of
inside is
thing.
more real than the thing outside.
Yeah, but then they're worshiping things physical and material in nature at the same time. So it is kind of weird.
Contradiction. Yeah. It's true. It's true.
Well, to kind of put a bow on this, and I know there's 3 volumes, right? And this first volume definitely shapes the way Christians engage with other religions and secular traditions. What is the hope that you have of, I would just put it out there, both Christians and non-Christians alike from your volume 1?
Just to understand, as I say, I'm not being polemical. I'm not going after anybody. Come along for the journey and let's just try to understand together, to be discerning about what I'm saying too. Be critical. It can't all be right. I'm still working through it. But come on the journey with me, because I've done a lot of work on this and I've spent a lot of time, some say wasted. And I really think it's important. And so I'd love to share that with you.
That's great. Well, Dr. Horton, or Mike, as you want me to call you, although it's still weird to say Mike. Thank you for your work on this. I know it's been decades of labor on this work specifically, and all the stuff you've done to help us understand our modern moment. And this is not just a new thing that kind of came out, but it's been in the water for a long time. And you're just, like you said, you're leading us by the stream and telling us, hey, look at that. That's a river we live in. That's a river that's going along in our streets in our city. So thanks for writing this, and thanks for coming on our show again and talking about your work. It's been a pleasure having you on.
Thanks. Always a pleasure with you guys too, and love what you're doing. Keep doing it.
Oh, thank you.